Okay, we're approaching the Vacaville area, and I'm really so afraid that I'm going to make a wrong turn and get arrested. Just because of the nature of the area that we're in. There's this prison borders a neighborhood. I can't imagine somebody going, well, let's go live right by a prison. You know, let's raise our kids right across the street from a prison. I mean, that just must be like, what a nightmare. The street, like we just passed a street called Butcher. And we're talking about how, what do you name the streets around a prison? You know, Death Row, Lane, Murders, Alley. You know, it's just, I don't understand how they could build a prison, and the place looks just like Nazi Germany, you know, totally. So this whole notion of prisons is really a really demented one, in my opinion. Oh, there she is. I'm here with Joanne Richards. We're here in Vacaville, and we're about to go to the Vacaville Prison. And I'm dressed. I'm trying to dress as conservatively. I had to actually borrow these pants, believe it or not, because I live in jeans. I have almost nothing but jeans and mini skirts, and I didn't think neither one was allowed.
Nothing is appropriate.
So I think I look very
conservative.
Okay, good. And I have a big coat to cover the whole body if that was necessary. Like if I don't look enough like a nun, then I do have that extra. So I can't bring a recording device. This camera we're shooting here in a parking lot of a McDonald's, just to kind of document this momentous occasion.
It is very momentous.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I might be the first person ever to have interviewed him come to the prison.
Except for me, yeah.
That's
when
incredible.
I used to be a journalist, yes.
Wow.
So, I mean, we've had friends, but nobody in a journalistic capacity, so this is great. And we'll buy a couple picture ducats so that we can take pictures of you being there. And it's really, once you get in there, it's really not as scary as it seems.
It's very pleasant.
It's very pleasant, and
I'm redoing my lipstick.
We just all, sit at our tables and eat and talk.
All right, so I guess the question is, how long has your husband been in prison, actually?
It's been 31 years since he was arrested, so 31 years minus about 4 or 5 months being out on bail.
Okay. And at this moment, is there any chance of what you call parole and getting out in the future, that kind of thing?
His sentence is life without parole, so technically no. It is. But, we keep trying to think of new strategies, and we keep hoping with overcrowding that they're going to realize they need to let out the older guys, because he's 60 now, and that's old for prison. So, we just keep hoping somebody will think carefully about their government decisions.
Okay. And is there going to be any topics that I cannot talk about, or things I can't say, or any of that kind of stuff? Because you should tell me that.
Because you're going in person, you can probably ask him anything you want. If it's something he can't tell you, he won't.
Okay.
And he'll either say, I can't tell you, or he'll just give us a look, like, don't ask me that. Or because if it's going to break his U.S. secrecy oath, he won't share that.
Okay.
So, I would try asking him anything you want, but just know he might have to not answer you.
All right. In terms of how long am I going to have with him?
So our appointment to get processed is technically 12, and if they're on time today, and who knows, and visiting ends at 2:30, so we should have an hour and a half to 2 hours. Okay. It's going to be, you guys getting accustomed to talking to each other, and he's going to check you out, and you're going to check him out, as far as because he's very cautious about meeting new people, and he has to decide that he can trust you.
All right.
So, I mean, he's been fine with you and me talking all these months and all these interviews, and he's been very, happy that we've been doing that, and very grateful for your support. So,
Okay, we won't be able to record our conversation, so what I have to do is remember his answers, more or
right,
less.
and then hurry, go home and write a blog or something.
Yeah. And in this case, we're going to try to maybe do a video blog right afterwards.
Yeah.
My fresh,
Oh, that would be great.
So just bringing that up. You're going to be speaking at the UFO Con
next weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's great. And I also want to ask him about his father, by the way. Is that okay? Is that
sure.
for both?
No. Again, the only thing that's forbidden is if it's going to break any secrecy oaths. And otherwise, he's pretty open.
And just out of curiosity, is his father has passed on or still alive?
No, he died in February of '97, right before we met.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So does he have any family that visits him regularly besides yourself?
No.
Okay, interesting. All right. Does he want me to ask him about the case that landed him in prison, or would he rather I don't do that?
I'm sure he wouldn't mind, and especially if you help us brainstorm possibilities of, legal strategies to pursue or whatever. That he's fine with that.
All right. Well, this is it, and I just wanted to do a quick sort of video blog here, and then we're going to go to the next step.
Yeah.
Then when I come back, we'll kind of revisit this a bit.
It'll be
so very exciting.
Good.
Thank you.
Hi,
this is Carrie Cassidy, and I've just come back from interviewing Mark Richards in the Vacaville Prison, and this has been a fascinating experience, I have to say. Way over the top. I mean, just amazing. Very interesting man. Definitely a military man of Germanic and British background, heritage, DNA, all of that. Very, very knowledgeable about the secret space program and everything attendant on that. I literally peppered him with questions nonstop. I can tell you that for all intents and purposes, he is exactly who he says he is. This is what appears to be the truth. He was, very, very well informed, very well read, very, very gracious, very astute, and answered all of my questions very clearly. There was no sort of attempts, or at least no obvious attempts at obfuscation. And I'm going to just reel out the information I was given, which in some cases is kind of mind-blowing and yet a validation of most of what I've been given or what I know for the 8 years in Camelot. I can say that this is a person who really knows what he's talking about and who is able to answer me from his own experience, very direct experience. He has been a captain in the military, in the Navy. His father was a high-ranking Air Force person, and also in the military. Both of them were in the secret space program. And the kinds of questions I asked him had to do with getting verification on who's running the planet, what the various races are that are visiting here and that are interacting with humans and aligning themselves with various countries, governments, and military factions. And so I was really asking him very high-level, sophisticated kinds of questions. It wasn't just, what kind of alien, what do they look like, although we do have some of that in there. There's he made some very clear statements that I will state here. And again, this is me going off my memory from having been there for about 2 hours in conversation with him, and I didn't have any pen or paper, wasn't allowed to keep notes of any kind, so everything comes off my memory. We're doing this right now so that I will have a clear record, and so that I can also document this for the public of what I've learned. And apparently it appears that he was given an okay to release this information gradually. And I am the first person who's gone to interview him on a sort of, you might call it an official capacity. There have apparently been a few visitors that are friends, became friends of him and Joanne, his wife. But for all intents and purposes, this is the very first time he's ever been interviewed in this way and for the purposes of release to the public. I can say that he talked about races of ETs that he dealt with directly through the years, and they involve, first and foremost, what he calls the raptors. And the raptor race being a group that look like the velociraptors to some degree, and I guess maybe they're even descended from them, that they consider the earth theirs, that they're an indigenous species to the earth, and that they really did die out, or actually they left during the end of the dinosaur era, but then some survived and then they returned apparently, and that they are interacting very directly with our military, that they have a joint base and joint operations going on or had in the Falklands, and that a current base down there, and it is that they are a species. They really do look like the pictures of them, like this in Jurassic Park, and that they love our luxury items. I was told that they also love cars, luxury cars, and things like that. That they have a set of family values. That their first approach to us that was back in, if I remember correctly, 1951. Give or take, and that their interaction was initially sort of negative with our race, but once they established relationships, we have become, I guess, tacit colleagues. They call us allies, humans allies, and that their initial impulse is to eat humans, and that they still can, do so at any given point if they get mad or whatever. I was given an example that, somebody could be having a friendly relationship, talking with them, and that if they got angry, they could turn around and eat a kid, that they like to eat humans. But that when you get in these military relationships with them, that they refrain, the way you could imagine sort of a vampire might refrain. In other words, they still have the capacity, but they refrain from exercising it. So they have been establishing and evolving over the last 40 years or 50 years or whatever it is, and their relationship with the humans, and that they have a very close relationship with Mark Richards, actually, who seems to have a very good friend who is among them. What he did describe was relationships that, as they exist between military and various alien races, that are not uniform. In other words, that they have, sort of some individuals, but actually factions within each group that may be, more predisposed to be favorable towards humans than less, and then others that are less so, even within the same races. But that I did ask him, like, overall agendas for each group. That there are two races of reptilians, that there are actually, many more races of reptilians, but there are two major races of reptilians that are antagonistic towards humans, that want to take over the earth, take back the earth for their own. They do consider it that they own the race, the earth also, that are battling with the raptor race for ownership of the earth, and that the humans are helping the raptors, and the raptors are helping the humans, the two, to battle these reptilian races, these two races that both have differing agendas, but more or less have to do with taking back the earth. One group of reptilians is more humanoid, standing on their legs and so on, and has a more human-like, and has even lost over time their tail and so on and so forth. And they then there's another race that is like a more traditional reptoid-looking race with tails, and neither of those are positively oriented towards humans for the most part. There is a group of Draco. They have the wings. We know of them as the Shikars. We didn't get a lot of time to discuss that, but he did talk about them being a different race altogether. And then there are so many different races here that are even operational here, that are coming in and out of the planet, and also that our atmosphere is very hard for them to deal with for the most part. He did agree that the terraforming of the planet, as I have stated in Camelot numerous times, with the methane and the Fukushima disaster involving radiation, is an effort to terraform the planet, to make it more amenable to certain races of beings, including the reptilians, so that they can be in our atmosphere more easily. That is the agenda. That is one of the agendas. The other, and I know I'm going to be jumping around because I have to grab my memory from all the different areas that we talked about. But basically, what happens is that they are terraforming this planet. They are looking to take the radiation, create a humanity 2.0. They're looking for mutants, just as the X-Men movie states. In other words, that radiation can then cause mutations that can be positive mutations for a race of beings, and that's what they're hoping to land on, is some more superpowers, access to that. Certainly, I think being able to travel in space more easily, for example, the better you can withstand radiation. We talked about so many things. This is going to be, I'm just going to fire, like a shotgun kind of thing here, because it was really quite substantial. I mean, I barely gave him any time to breathe, because I was, asking him things just like that. And at no point did he even, hesitate. And when he didn't know something, he was clear. He if I said something that was too general, he asked me to be more specific. We did have a good rapport, and were easily able to talk to each other. He is a typical, he comes from a Germanic English background. He has blue eyes and, the light skin, looks fairly Germanic. He would definitely is a high-ranking officer in the secret space program. He was framed. The murder actually happened when he wasn't even here. He was on an assignment, and specifically having come back and was having a meal with his mother when the actual, I guess, thing occurred. But for all intents and purposes, he was not able to defend himself because he was away on a mission during the time when the plotting was supposed to be going on, and all these other things that he's been accused of. And certainly you can't use your secret mission as a defense in a proceeding of this nature, because it violates the security oath for one thing, and for the another thing, no one would believe him. Okay, so there are also, we talked about the Greys, we talked about the Dulce Battle. He talked about violence as being a real last resort, that he said in some ways they were kind of young and naive back in those days during the Dulce Battle, that they went in and were supposed to be sort of a friendly threat rather than an overt threat, or rather than a down-and-out battle, but it devolved into a battle, because they simply didn't know how to handle it, and ended up having to kill a number of the Greys, etc., in order to try to free the humans that are being experimented on there. He agreed with me. He said that they were sent in by Carter, and that prior to that, I questioned him about Eisenhower and the witnesses that is out there talking about that they went in to invade during the Eisenhower administration, and he said Eisenhower wanted the place nuked, and in fact, nuking is one of the ways that they do go in and they are fighting battles. He talked about the fact that there was Sean David Morton has got a whistleblower that he wrote a book about, and so I was curious whether that whistleblower testimony was correct, and basically apparently it is. There was or is an alien who runs that place who is not a Grey. Most of the Greys are clones, he says. They use these interdimensional gates that require them to dematerialize, and when they rematerialize on the other end, they're not the same being, and the humans can do the same thing, but that they hesitate, and most of them, like even Mark himself, will not go through certain kinds of gates that require them to dematerialize, because when they reappear on the other side, they basically have to die to show up there. They do show up in their same human form with all their memories intact, etc., but they're not the same exact being as the one who left. It's a duplicate, so to speak. And then if they come back and they cross back over, they again have to die, dematerialize, and rematerialize again in the same, configuration, which we have. But he said it's detrimental. There tends to be a degrading process that goes on in those kind of gates, and that he declined to use them as a result. He said the Greys use them, however, all the time, and that's part of the reason that their race is so devolved on certain physical levels, and he says it also affects the mental. He does say that he himself was augmented with. I asked him if his intelligence was augmented and other capacities. He alluded to the fact that yes, he has been augmented, as many of the secret space program military have been, and most of the people that I've talked to that are part of that program, especially on the more secret side, and this is even before the days of what we call super soldiers. He said, but there's a great deal of truth in the super soldier story that involves augmentation and what I call robotic Superman, and verified that is their agenda, that is being carried out, and that the nano is he thinks the most dangerous side of that, and he said he's had direct experience with the nano, although we didn't have time to talk about in what way. So I was very interested to know who's running planet Earth, and in the bottom line, he said, is no one is running planet Earth, because they're all more or less at war with each other within the various races of ETs that are visiting here, some of whom that believe they own the planet, as well as the humans. In other words, just as we have no countries that really, they're all at differing agendas, this is what we have in the alien side of things. And he said, if anything, it's more complex than the human relations here on planet Earth, politically and otherwise. But we did talk about the Zachariah Sitchin Anunnaki, the conception of the humanoid, very tall beings that are depicted on the temples, and he verified that those are indeed those beings, and that they did look like that or do. And did not seem certain as to whether beings like Enki or Enlil are still alive, and whether or not they would be returning at this time. We did talk about the return of Marduk. He indicated that there's some possibility that there's some truth there, but again that they don't run the Earth. Maybe they want to be, but they're not. And he did say that the group in Sumer were reptilian, however, and that they looked reptilian, and that they are related to the ones that are actually running the Vatican at this time, which he did verify is a group of reptilians. And that when I talked about one of the significant areas that I had put out there that I had tapped into on a psychic level, which had to do with Obama during the so-called coronation, or whatever they call it, of the new Pope, who is indeed a Nazi. And therefore the Nazis have a relationship, even through DNA, to the reptilian factions. He said that indeed, that when Obama went to pay homage, to Israel, that underground in Dimona and all of that there does seem to be, that's where the base of the Anunnaki, what we know of as these humanoid Anunnaki, are. And from what I understood, and that indeed that Biden went to pay respects to the new Pope was the sort of a nod to that, but basically a statement by the United States, in essence saying that we are not going to necessarily bow down to the Nazi contingent that's running the Vatican. He did talk very specifically. We talked about some new information I'd gotten recently having to do with the Chinese and where the Chinese are at. He agreed that the Chinese are dealing with a new race of beings that is giving them new technology. And I've been told that they wants them to, in essence, run the world. But he did not feel that they are taking over the financial system. Contrary to some reports I was getting lately, he does not feel that they are... he had not heard that there was a contingent of elders that had gone to try to make a deal in Britain, basically sidelining the Rothschilds and the Bush cabal. He said that the Chinese were not going to be running the financial system from what he knows, and that they were barely making it. And he said that actually they're going to be hard-pressed in the next 5 years to keep themselves going. He thinks that they're going to have a civil war, that the Chinese people are actually in rebellion against their leaders in China, and that there is going to be a civil war as a result. I did ask him if as I felt that the secret space program, is run for the most part by the U.S. humans military, and he agreed that was for the most part the case. But he did say that they had been very much beleaguered financially by the problems that have been happening here on planet Earth, and that money does seem to have, the medium of exchange does seem to interrupt or dampen their ability to do the kinds of things with the secret space program they would like to be doing, and has dampened some of their strength on a certain level. Obviously the secret space program is worked in connection with various alien groups, and we talked about which groups are out there, which groups are aligned positively with the humans and which are not. We talked about what is known as the Galactic Federation. We also talked about another group that's called the Collective, and we talked about, as I said, the reptilians and the raptors. So it seems to be divided into those kind of groups in terms of factions that are at least the ones you can address without going into so much detail as to all the different races beyond that. And there are groups also that go interdimensionally. We didn't have time to talk about all of that, but there are many different kinds of gates here, stargates on the planet, some of which are natural stargates that involve as this sort of vortexes, and some that involved you can go to the moon and Mars. He said the most easy thing to transport is material items, more so than physical beings, but that you can definitely take the gates, and that he and his father both took gates on a regular basis between here and the moon and Mars. I'd asked him if it degraded, if it was a problem physically to take a gate, because I remember that Henry Deacon had talked about and complains of some of his health problems as a result of using the gates, and he did say that was one of the results. Let's see, there's so much, and I'm going to try to grasp it as quickly as I can. He talked about Eisenhower meeting at just as is in the public domain, with the groups of aliens. We talked about Nordics from Orion. Okay, so I had a theory that not all the Nordics are so friendly to our agenda. Certainly there are some Nordics that are. He did say that the Pleiadians and Nordics are different races and that they look different. And the one way you could tell was that the Nordics actually have white blonde hair and some other different physicality, but the Pleiadians have hair my color. He doesn't know anything about the Billy Meyer stories, so I asked him about that. We talked about the AI. I asked him if there was an AI running Earth. He said there is not. However, there's a lot of danger from AI. It's one of their biggest so-called potential enemies are the various races that have AI, and that he also talked about the humans that are now walking around that have been taken over by AI. He talked about the fact that we are protected here on planet Earth. It sounded a little like, he said we were like Israel is to the rest of the world, in a sense that they have their protectors that keep them alive, but some of their protectors are not necessarily their friends, but that they kind of, it's like a tacit peace in which they acknowledge that they can't just, get rid of all the human race because they will bring war down upon them. So they kind of have a tacit truce, if you will, to allow humanity to be on the planet. He said, but if it wasn't for the fighting between the races that are here and visiting and with various agendas, that humanity wouldn't have lived this long on this planet at all, because there are a lot of them that would like to do away with humanity altogether. So it's kind of like the fighting, the friend of my friend is the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. He talked about why, because we talked about why is there secrecy, and the fact that all the races, including the humans, are in complete agreement that this secrecy has to continue because humanity is not ready to deal with the reality of the ET presence, which has nothing to do with how, what the various ETs races look like, and that we could handle what they look like. What we can't handle is how they act. In other words, the fact that they want to eat us. That there are a number of those races out there that basically want to, eat us for dinner, and so that we, that mentality of going out and dealing with these races and knowing that, any moment they want to eat you, was something that humanity couldn't handle. I asked him of the Battle of LA, for example. There were kind of some small anecdotal things that I asked him, like details, and I wanted to know what race of beings were the Battle of LA had to do with. He said that the Japanese are dealing with various races of ETs, and indeed, various countries have various relationships with different groups of ETs. So this further makes a more of a complexity in the international relations, as I've always known. Although very few people out there seem to realize that or deal with that. In other words, we have governments. The governments do not act alone. They act in concert with the various ET races that they have alignments with, and those agendas, whatever the agendas happen to be. And he said that the Japanese were dealing with a couple of different races, and that they have been for, through the last 4,000 years or more. And we talked about the battle in the Pacific, the underground bases of the various ETs there. He validated that. He said the Navy is indeed at war with a group of reptilians, and what are in essence reptilians with undersea bases in the Pacific Rim, that they've nuked a number of them, that they nuked an island off of LA, which is called something like LA Island or something, and that most people don't even know that, and it's like 200 miles from LA. He said nuclear power was really useless in space, completely antiquated technology, that it really did no good, and that wasn't useful for anything except occasionally here on Earth to use as a weapon, or in space to basically, he said, shoot into an asteroid to then blow up a passing ship that they want to destroy. That's what he said, how it was used. But he said it was a very crude method to even do that. So in other words, things like particle beam weapons and scalar weapons were far in advance of the kinds of, of nuclear technology. But obviously the nukes are useful, or nuclear technology here on Earth, to change the environment into a high radiation environment, so that we would in essence mutate into having various powers, etc. I didn't get a chance to ask him about Phobos, which I wanted to, but I talked to him about Solar Warden. He said Solar Warden is this interplanet, it's part of our solar system. It's a group guardians that are going around, monitoring incoming and outgoing craft and races. He does know something about ISON and the beings that are coming as part of ISON, and he's going to try to get that information to me in as best a way he can. And he clearly knows a tremendous amount. It's just quite amazing. He just didn't even hesitate. He talked about the cutting edge of having technology as a race and being a spacefaring race is all about having an ability to tap into what he calls a black star, and that a black star can then become a black hole. But that's where they get their technology, that there's a huge source of power there that races use to power their spacecraft, and to use what he called warp drive, to have the ability to warp, jump, that Star Trek way. And he said that humans do have that technology, but only because they've been given it or have stolen it from getting certain craft that are drifting around out and been in other words, their occupants are gone, but this is a craft that has that technology. That they are still trying to reverse engineer certain kinds of spacecraft that they use in concert with the races that they're partners with, I guess, so to speak. That technology that gives them access to the Black Star technology, but that they don't own it for themselves yet. So that's a big inhibiting factor to being able to rule space the way they'd like to, or have any kind of dominance out there without the help of their alliances with these races. Most Greys are clones. That the Zeta Reticuli is, I kind of get off the subject when I was talking about Dulce, that their one being that is running Dulce was at least from a far-off star system, and he is highly intelligent, a different being than the Greys. That I asked him if he was a Zeta Reticuli. He seemed to think that he might have been from another race altogether. So this is kind of the playing field. He said the Rothschilds had less sort of dominance than commonly thought, although that they do have a position in terms of the power sort of structure, and obviously the Bushes are players, etc. He did say that you will not find a documented record of the Bush family lineage DNA wise anywhere, because it contains reptilian DNA, but they're not shapeshifters, contrary to what people think, but they are in their DNA is absolutely reptilian DNA. That they don't go to regular hospitals, and there's a reason for that. And the Nazis, the same thing, that there is a bloodline that has to do with the reptilian DNA that is in the Nazi line. The two main reptilian species they were discussing, or he was discussing, he said, don't get along with each other so much. Each one considers the other one lesser than themselves, although they have the same agenda, but it's to exclusion of each other. So again, that kind of animosity works for us. And the raptors, he's had a great deal of dealings with the raptors, it appears, from not only having friends among the raptor species, specific friends, to having been discovered when he was a child in Marin County, where there was a crash of a spacecraft that was taken down by a group of incoming raptor craft, and that actually it was his wife Joanne who said he had a scar from a blood brother relationship with the raptors that was made when he was a little child, a little baby, in fact, right after he was born. He talked about the raptors being able to speak English or any language they wanted, that they had to be altered. Their vocal cords didn't have to had to be slightly altered so that they could communicate using voices like we do, and that they could then communicate using our language and so on. But that lots of the raptors that aren't on the higher levels of the military and the raptor society don't have that alteration, so they have to use things like sign signals and things. He said they're slightly telepathic, but not all that telepathic. I asked him, if indeed he had some augmentation or abilities in that area, and he seems to have that. He said he did allude to the fact that his physicality being what it is, although he does have physical problems. He's I think he's 60 years old or more. And he said in his current capacity that if he didn't have that augmentation, he probably would not have survived 30 years of prison, just physically. So whatever that means, it sounds quite interesting what it really means in terms of his dealings with his fellow inmates, so to speak. Let's see, what else? I'm trying to think in terms of anything else I can think of. He did say, I asked him where the gates were, and I named Menwith Hill and Dimona, and he named another part of Israel that had a gate. He said there were gates in the mountain ranges in between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and that there were gates, and that was riddled with gates along there, that there was a number of gates, and I believe these are natural gates, between Iraq and Iran. And of course, being that there are battles over these gates, and that we make sure to try to have command of them. In essence, I mean, if you were to sum up everything, he said he was basically talking about this kind of being almost, it sounds like a mess here on Earth, that there are so many different agendas in operation for these various races of ETs, and that there's so many of them. And that they're all dealing with the militaries and the various things, that it's really hard to separate things out and talk about them. He said you can't make a blanket statement for all one race, any more than you can one country, so to speak. He talked about why he ended up in jail, why they framed him particularly. He said he had become disenchanted with his job in the military. He was not aligned with the Nazi agenda, and he is not happy with the obviously experimentation that's going on by various races on humanity, and that he also, it sounds like, he didn't like any kind of blanket murder of the ET races, even if they were our enemies. To some degree, and he had liaisons with Russian women, interpersonal relations, as well as a head of French intelligence, apparently a woman, and that those alliances, although he fed information and reported on them regularly, etc., as an officer, he said that made him a threat in our military in such a way that they became worried that he would become a whistleblower, and so this is why they arranged and framed him. That he was vocal about his disagreement with some of the agendas that he was asked to be a part of, and that this became more problematic. His father, however, was more aligned with their the sort of what you might say the standard New World Order mission to some degree, at least throughout his life, because he was brought up with that perspective more so than Mark. And let's see what else. Trying to think about any other areas that we talked about. And I may have to just wait for my memory to come back in certain things, because I'm just trying to get everything. He said he'd had a lot of dealings with the Vatican, and I guess the races of reptilians under the Vatican. Oh, he said John Paul, the death of John Paul back in, I think it was the 60s or 70s, whenever he was killed, that was a killing, that he didn't just die, he was killed, as many people have suspected. And that was, he said in 79, the Vatican went through a drastic change, and there was some kind of, it wasn't clear. I didn't get a clear answer as to, or wasn't able to really delve down into it too far. But because what happens is our time was getting shorter and shorter. But he said that in 79, a lot of people don't realize there was a massive change. It sounded like it was kind of like earth-wide, but it was also specifically to do with the Vatican and a power struggle within the Vatican. What else? Well, I talked about the financial system, and again, that, was it true that the Chinese were actually going to be able to take it over? And he said no, that he hadn't heard anything like that. He is tuned in and has contacts on the outside. He is in communication regularly with people that are on a high level. I talked about being at the Bilderberg event, in the Fringe event, the demonstration where I spoke and so on. And he said that he has a relationship with various members of the Bilderberg. Let's see what else. Oh, he said that the idea of shape-shifting, a lot like, that David Icke talks about, is really not very accurate. That there are very few races that ever have the ability to shape-shift. That it's more, in other words, I guess a DNA thing, a bloodline thing, but that there are races, he said, that use, like, they'll materialize here, or they'll use a what is in essence a android body that looks very human, and then they will manipulate it from a distance using an AI. I think that from what I understand, the Andromedans, first of all, he said there was hundreds of races of Andromedans, so that you couldn't just call one group the Andromedans, and that they have different agendas. So he talked about the praying mantis people as well. And he said they've lost power over the last 50 years, that group. But they were initially favorable towards humans, and that now they may be more broken up. They had some kind of civil war with praying mantises within their faction. He said that the initially the praying mantises were favorable to humans, and were our allies, but that has changed over time. But they're still, I guess, predominantly our allies, although I think that there are breakups within their factions, so that you don't know who you're dealing with. And this is true, he said, also within reptilian groups, and so on. The Greys definitely are at the beck and call of the reptilians, he said. Let's see. He said that one of the reasons he's talking to me, or can talk to me, is that they know that because he's a prisoner, right? He's a felon, convicted felon, whatever you call that. That nobody will believe him, and so this is their way of seeding information out to the public in one way, but in the other way, their plausible deniability is substantial, because if I say, as I'm saying, all the things he said, people will not believe the source, will not believe him, because he's been in prison for a murder charge, even if it's trumped up for the last 30 years. So they feel safe in that way, but at the same time, they want to get information out. Just as he said, the movies were being used for this purpose as well, movies and television, that they're trying to wake humanity up to some degree, although, they want to keep the lid on certain things. He's talked about crash retrievals. He was part of crash retrievals on a regular basis. He said the United States is still going out around the world, paying off certain governments. For example, I mentioned, South Africa and various African countries where crashes are happening. The U.S. military or secret space program will go in right away, try to be the first ones on the scene, and their job is to get that technology at whatever cost. They will kill locals, whatever they have to do in order to get that technology. So that's their mission. This is what they're being told to do. And he was part of some of those missions. So recovering technology is still key. Trying to think about anything else I might have asked him about. I asked him about the black nano oil in the Falklands. He said he'd heard about that, but he didn't have, even though he was part of the Battle of the Falklands, he was not exposed directly to that, so he doesn't know anything about it really much. He's highly knowledgeable, and he's flown many spacecraft, interstellar types of craft, and his father was a fighter pilot in World War II, and in fact he has a Nazi bloodline. He has people that he and his father was fighting against that are members of the Nazis or were. And I talked to him about the time travelers that are actually the Nazi technology for time travel, that in essence the bell that came out of the bell, and that they've had that technology since the 40s, that they do have a way to go over to the other side, the parallel Earth, bring back Nazis or even other beings, humans, such as my whistleblowers said. I talked about this in my time travel conference from a whistleblower that I have, and that he did say there are many operations that involve time travel, and that many ways in which they can bring back the human. In other words, make them younger. They're working on all these aspects of it. So he's met with Nazis that are made younger in this way. He himself has dealt with them. So he validated that information, which was fascinating, and said you can't always tell where the person who we knew in history, what means they used to bring them back, whether they crossed over from the what we call parallel Earth, or whether it was this technique to use reduce your age and then augment you, etc., and have you live a very long life. He didn't say there are many different ways that could be done, and so any particular individual could have used be part of whatever program. Let's see what else. Talked about Area 51 containing a gate. He said, Los Alamos, just as we thought, contains a gate. And he's basically, places in the Southwest United States. As I said, Menwith Hill, Dimona. He said Australia was a very strong area, the outback of Australia. Oh, this has gone. I think we're about to lose battery. I think it's the battery's gone out. Looks like we're still broadcasting, but I'm not sure. Is that on? Mm-hmm. Is this on? Okay. He said that Australia, out in the deserts of Australia, has a number of gates that people use, and especially the U.S. military uses. He said there's things he can't tell me that absolutely have to do with whether he'd be killed or not, and whether his family members would be killed, so that he has a select group of information that he can, reply to. But there is also a very select group of information he cannot acknowledge that he knows and talk about. trying to think if there's anything else. I think I'm running out of information at this point. So we can stop and I'll try to think of some more. Okay, thank you. The prison outside looks like literally from the Nazi era, but it's bordered by these neighborhoods with kids, and people live right next door to the prison. It's unbelievable to me that they would want to live there, but maybe they have to live there. I'm not sure why, but anyway, the prison inside, when you go to meet with the prisoners, is not anything like the movies. In this case, at least, it's not all lined up with tables and chairs where people sit opposite each other and have conversations and can't touch and all this. People are hugging each other and sitting next to each other really close, couples and babies and all running around, and little children, and there's paintings on the wall, murals that the prisoners have made with, jungle scenes and animals, and, looks kind of like a playroom, and it has all little tables and chairs, and everything's a little bit small, like it was borrowed from a school. And they're all, everyone is eating from vending machines, and they have a microwave, and they're making, popcorn, and, so it's not really an awful experience. That part is very human, you might say. And although there are guards and everything, they don't get in your face, and they're not standing over you. I guess their high-powered cameras are documenting everything that you say, but we were able to talk quite quietly, and there's a huge amount of noise because everyone's talking once to their spouses and all that kind of thing. And we were there for 2 hours or more. We were delayed because he said that there was some kind of delay. He didn't know if it had to do with trying to delay him or not, but more delay than usual, bringing him out to see us. And that was interesting. We basically had to sit in these little chairs, kind of hunched over, talking to each other. The three of us, me and Joanne, his wife, and him. While he ate a salad that he got from a vending machine she got for him while he was talking to me. And, and I could have eaten some. I just drank water. And Joanne made popcorn and ate it. From the microwave. Let me see if there's anything I'm thinking of. When I first got there, I described Camelot a little more to him. He seemed to know something about Camelot. And I have to say, he definitely has his sources of information, like people that he's getting information from. He definitely talked about dear friends in the military and so on. And Joanne told me that the prisoners, the guards are not able to, they try once in a while to they try to catch these people and try to get them in trouble and stuff, but he's very, he's kind of like that Germanic, strong, no nonsense kind of guy. He's not a joker or anything. He's very intellectual, kind of an intellectual physique. Although you could see he was probably stronger when he was younger and so on. He's still strong though, looks strong. But he's definitely sort of a no nonsense kind of guy. He's, we weren't making jokes and all that kind of thing. He's not like that at all. So, but he said that the guards tried to call him punk or something, and he basically, because he's a major, a captain, and maybe, I guess, a major in the military, he insists on being treated with respect by the guards, and he outranks them, she said. So they're supposed to treat him with respect. And he insists upon it. And I'm not sure how that manifests, like, whatever. She said that she feels protected and that people have been following her, and they're often following her not to spy on her, but to protect her, she thinks, because he insists upon it. Maybe as part of his deal in incarceration or whatever. And their house has been broken in. It gets broken into every single time she leaves it, like for a trip to go a speaking engagement. But they're, the authorities, the military is always in evidence, having snuck in. They try to cover their traces, but they don't do it very well. So she's aware that they're always going through her stuff. She talks about being on the tour, I guess the Glastonbury tour, when she went to England to speak just recently, and there was a man dressed in black from head to toe, standing there, looking with the camera, looking very out of place, not fitting in, but basically there on a job to watch her. And that he was not a good guy. He said something intriguing to me when I was about to leave, that was something about he could tell me more about Camelot. So I didn't know what he was meaning by that, and I'm thinking that maybe he's talking about King Arthur's Camelot or in the relationship, but I don't really know, or what he's talking about, or exactly, maybe even about this, or my project, I don't know. In the meeting with Eisenhower on the air base in, I forget what it's called, Morocco or whatever they call it, Edwards, he said there was 3 groups of aliens. One was called, he said they call them something like the I want to say the gargoyles, but that's not what he called them. He calls them something like the ghouls, or something that they have a name that sounds kind of like they make a joke about this race of beings. But they were there, and there was, I guess, the Nordics and the reptilians. That's what was there. I think there's one point when he said that people should be paying more attention to, when I was talking about Humanity 2.0 and their efforts in that direction. In essence, he was kind of saying that people should pay more energy, put more energy towards that, maybe, and less towards the outer space, kind of cute little alien stories than they do, because there's a lot going on in planet Earth here, I guess, where they're really trying to manipulate the human, so to speak, and that is something to be investigated and paid more attention to. I mean, he definitely talked about going to the moon and Mars as like a normal thing. He also talked about going to the moons, like moons of Titan, he named, and other moons. And that he says we're out in space doing space mining, so to speak. And oh yes, I guess this is it. And I wanted to know about the gold, because recently somebody was telling me, the Chinese have more gold than anyone else. Actually, that's not true, according to him. He says that we are bringing gold and silver in from other planets, and that they come from all different other planets, that we're not the only ones with gold and silver, and that we're bringing gold and silver onto the planet. And obviously the secret space uses that to basically be in charge of the world. He said that he also said that the whole idea of having an empire is like the most common sort of configuration or model in space for ruling, for a race to rule, that kind of commandeering, what it sounded like, commandeering resources and some form of money. He said there's always some form of exchange, regardless of what it might be, and with most other races. He said that our Oort cloud of asteroids surrounding us makes us a very difficult place to get to without using a gate. In other words, if you want to fly here using spacecraft, and that because of that, the Earth was quite a protected zone in a certain way, that alien races had trouble getting here using craft, and that they had to be quite advanced to get here, like their space travel abilities. That he said there was no second sun. He said we might have been a binary system a while ago, but that, to his knowledge, and he's been out there, he says, to quote him, we do not have a second sun. That we only have one sun. He decided Jupiter, and they have to be very careful about not igniting Jupiter into a second sun, which is the same thing Briscoe said, by the way. So that validates Briscoe's information. He knows a lot about propulsion systems and, I guess, free energy, all that stuff. So, but he seemed to say that using that black star he talked about black stars being a source of neutrinos, and that neutrinos were the best source of fuel for getting around the solar systems, and again going warp and all that stuff. He's flown all kinds of craft, and that he's flown experimental craft that then became part of the secret space program. He seemed to think that, or said that, kind of like that there's distortion in the Star Trek version, that people tend to believe too much of that. He did also refer to himself, however, as a Captain Kirk character. That in essence was his job, the same job as the one Captain Kirk has. In other words, leading the space fleet. I got the impression that both he and Joanne are having ongoing relationships and communication with at least the Raptors, if not other races as well. He said he was placed in prison, he believes, by a certain group of reptilians in concert with some humans that don't like him and didn't trust him. I think maybe, in essence, kind of the Wolfowitz-Cheney contingent is among those that are not his friends. He talked about, actually, human women being extremely desirable to off-planet races, and that reptilians and raptors can mate with human women and create offspring that are then hybrids. They look human for the most part, but that they have to be assisted. And I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but they have to be assisted, in some ways. And that they consider it like a big deal to be with a human woman. And that lots of races, it sounded like he was saying lots of races. Talked about Septepi, Göbekli Tepe, the discovery in Turkey. And he said that was had a very strong connection to Sirius, the races from Sirius, and that they were he called them Canaanite, something like that, Canaanite or something, beings, and that they, look like dogs, basically standing up on their hind feet, and that they've been dealing with coming here for eons, basically. He also talked about the cat people, same thing. He talked about the Egyptians. He said they were dealing with all the different races coming here, and that they were, on a pretty sophisticated level for the 2,000 years that their civilization was an operation. I think it was 2000. He said he was involved with this island called St. George down by the Falklands. I think it's down there. And he said there's a major, I guess, base of some kind going on there. And I think that might be where the raptors are as well. He definitely was talking about wars taking place, like over the last, 50 years between all the different races, including happening here on Earth. In other words, we're part of it. He also said that various factions in the military, for example, the Air Force, has been dealing with, I think he said the Raptors, for super long time, and therefore the Navy, if I got this right, don't trust them all that much. In other words, the different factions, because I was asking him, it's been known to Camelot that the various divisions of the military don't necessarily trust each other. And because they're aligned with different groups of ETs, and I asked him if he could verify that, and he did. That indeed is the case. He definitely said that they have undersea bases. He said Catalina was a base that was ours, but it really belongs to an ET group, and that we are the security guards, he said, for the Catalina base. He stressed that various races really like our luxury items. Specifically then says he'd be surprised what one group of beings will do for some chocolate. And he said that almost sounded a little sinister. And along those lines, he did say that Earth is he didn't just say Earth, but he said our entire solar system is very well positioned on the Milky Way galaxy. It's a very desirable location, apparently, to other races. It's a highly contested area. And, of course, Earth itself is. Partially because of sort of like all the goodies, I think he even called it goodies it contained. Presumably the humans being among one of the goodies that he was talking about. So he said, that's part of the issue. He said that his bloodline is the Stewart family in England. But that he also comes from a Scottish division of that, and also this very strong German part of his bloodline that has to do with I believe he said the Habsburgs. One of his relatives is involved with one of the Habsburg princesses or something. And what that does is sort of validate the level he achieved in the military as well. Because obviously they're promoting those bloodlines. The reason that you don't see these craft, like gigantic craft taking off from Earth to go out in space, is because they can transport materials, like physical materials, very easily through the gates. And so they can use small craft to then, just take, I guess, small teams out there. 2 miles. Take exit towards South Laredo and Marines. And so that's why there's not so many big craft, or that you don't have to worry about hiding big craft, because it's all about. And he said they can go as far as the moon and Mars. He said after that it gets what he called dicey to try transporting things, meaning through the gates. And that does coincide a bit with what Dan Burish had said. Dan Burish had referenced early on the gates as being materials would move through the gates. And that Dan Burish said there was limitation on, first of all, he said humans couldn't go through the gates, which is not true. I just remembered that he said he was part of Project Moondust. He called it Operation Moondust. And that was a crash retrieval program for recovering technology, he said. As we know, which is documented out there. But the interesting thing about that is that I wrote a screenplay years ago before Project Camelot, and I named it Project Moondust. And because I'd seen the name Moondust out there, it's just a synchronicity. But the thing is that he also talked about robots. In other words, that one of the biggest threats we have is possible incoming races of robots, that obviously running on an AI kind of interface that would look humanoid, I guess like Battlestar Galactica. That's a real possibility, but they may not look humanoid. That's also the possibility. And another big threat, he said, was AI in general. That was a big danger. And nano, that was the other, he said, big danger to humanity is nano. And he said he had direct experience with that. There was a couple things that I wanted to remember what he said. I can't remember. It'll come to me.